Should you sign a record deal? Or more importantly, should you sign a major record deal? Now, this is a really tough question, and a question that I think crops up more than you'd think, because record labels do sign a lot of artists. But one thing I do hear is people saying, I'd never sign a major, I'd never get into bed with a record label. And that answer kind of shows inexperience. It shows that you have never been in that position, and if you think like that, you probably won't be able to get into that position. So what I want to do today is I want to look at the real world scenario of what happens when you get signed to a record label. I'm going to go with not necessarily a major, but like a large record label. I want to look at the numbers. I want to look at the budgets. I want to look at income in, income out. I want to look at expectations put on you, expectations from the record label, expectations on the record label. And then after that, I want to look at how labels work and the options that you have of why you should or shouldn't sign a record label. Because if you said, you should sign a record label or you shouldn't sign a record label, it's the same thing as saying, should you get married? And some people would say, I would never get married. And if you went, well, what happens if Margot Robbie comes knocking on the door and she wants to marry you? You might say, all right, well, maybe in that case I would. So every record label and every record deal is going to be slightly different. And so I'm going to go through a bunch of hypothetical but real world scenarios. But I want you to think of this as, what I don't want in the comments people saying things like, oh, that's different when I signed my record, because every record deal is different. Okay, so let's just go through roughly how this works so we can get to grips with it. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to get to the point where the record label wants to sign you. And this is all about leverage. This bit's really, really important. Now, the chances of a label just knocking on your door because Mr. EMI walked past the window and just went, look, that's the best music I've ever heard in my life, I need to sign you. Slim. Can happen. Like someone, back in the day it used to happen a lot. Nowadays, someone hearing a song or hearing you perform and just saying, this is amazing, I need to sign you, does happen. The problem if that does happen is you have no leverage. Because at the moment, unless you have something going for you, like for example, you've recorded the album or you've got big social media numbers or you've got opportunities afforded to you because of your experience as an artist, if you don't have that and you're just getting picked up off the street by Mr. EMI, then you don't have any leverage. So therefore, my advice is you probably should sign the record label because they are probably going to fleece you, but what else you got, at that moment. So I'm going to go through a hypothetical example here of an artist, a hypothetical artist that I'm going to call, because he's a rock star, Colin. Okay? Now, Colin has just got to the point where he's been offered a deal by a very large record label that we are going to call, hypothetically, Boney Music, okay? Not to be confused with GUM Music, okay? So it's Colin and Boney Music. Now, in order for Colin to get a deal on the table, before we look at what that deal is, Colin built up his leverage. Now, what that means is he funded his own songs. He put his own songs out, as in on Spotify and other DSPs. Those started to build. He used social media pretty much all as the entire sort of way of building his profile, and social media then built into the opportunities and into his Spotify numbers and other DSPs. Now, because of that, he was putting out 4, 5, 6, 7 songs, and over a period of time, one of those songs landed, okay? Now, one of those songs landed so much that playlists started to pick it up, socials was really picking it up, everything started to fly, and then he was getting, I'm going to say just for the sake of arguments, around about 100,000 spins on Spotify per day, okay? Now, if you get some big playlists, that can easily happen. Now, that doesn't take into consideration Apple Music and Amazon and Pandora and Deezer and Tidal and everything else. So we're just talking about Spotify. But because he's got that one big track and he's funded all of this himself, he now has really, really good leverage. Because at this point, the record label's going, proof of concept. Like, your social media numbers are flying.